right, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to Cougar Mountain's weekly webinar series. We're doing a special one today as part of a series on the value of reports in Denali. Today's webinar is going to focus on internal controls to reduce the risk of fraud. My name is Jeremy Beislein. I am a trainer here at Cougar Mountain Software. I'll be your presenter today. And we ask that if you have any questions or any comments that you would like to make as we're going along, go ahead and type those in the chat. But we ask that you keep your mic or your phone muted during the webinar because we've got a lot to cover today and we've only got a short amount of time to do it all in. At the end of the webinar, I'll review the questions in the chat and I'll try to get those answered. And of course, we'll post the answers to your questions on the website as well once we get the webinar uploaded and ready to go. Okay, so today's topics, we're going to be talking about the different options in Denali to help prevent fraud, help prevent any kind of fraudulent activity in your organization. We're going to talk about the different rights that you can give users that use Denali to help prevent the fraud. We're going to talk about watching your cash account, just a quick overview of that. We're going to talk about an overview of watching your expenses and also any vendors that may be taking advantage of your business. Denali's got some features in there to help you with that. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit about employee time and payroll. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So, to start off today, Denali here at Cougar Mountain, we've got several different features, but I wanted to just give a quick overview here that our other trainer had typed up a little paragraph here I wanted to start with. And it says here that every year in the U.S. businesses lose millions of dollars to fraudulent activity. Sometimes the employee or partners are unknown of the business and uses experience knowledge to extract funds. In many cases, the fraud is committed by a staff member who is operating right under the owner's nose. And oftentimes, the fraud occurs over a long period of time before it is detected, if it's even detected at all. And nonprofits are also susceptible to fraud as well by employees working for the nonprofit agency or other sources as well. So, with nonprofits, though, it's a little easier to detect the fraud after it happens because nonprofits are also subject to audits periodically on a regular basis to make sure that the funds are going where they're allocated to and also to make sure there is no fraudulent activity going on. And the for-profit sector, audits occur on occasion from the IRS, of course, to make sure that the company is paying their share of taxes, or from the owners or shareholders of the business that may require an audit to ensure that the business activities are going as planned and that there is no fraud going on. However, an audit only detects the fraud after it happens. So the key is to start with prevention to make sure that the fraud doesn't happen in the first place. And that's where Denali comes in. That's where your accounting software and your security settings come in, to make sure that the fraud doesn't happen. So when the audit happens, the audit shows no signs of fraud and everything looks nice and clean on your business. So the first steps in Denali to lock up the security, make sure that you don't have fraud, is to set user rights. And I'm going to switch over here to our Denali settings here. In the controller module, we have the option to add users that will be using the Denali software. And as you add these users, you can go in here and you can select what rights those users have. Now, when a user is first added, they don't have any rights. So you can specifically assign functions that the user has rights to in Denali to give them access to the work they need to do, but prevent them to have access to things that they shouldn't have access to, and to make sure that they don't have access to other functions of Denali. A good example of that would be, let's say Bill here is our accounts payable clerk. So we might want to give him access to the accounts payable module. But I am the manager over the company and I want to actually narrow down and I want to set it up here so that I'm going to let Bill do all the work However, I want to review his work before it is posted, so I will uncheck the post option here so he does not have access to post the work he's done. He still does all the work, so I don't have to do it all for him, but I just review it at the end of the day and post everything. Another great option is Bill might only be the accounts payable purchasing clerk for purchasing and spending money and entering those expenses. However, all the invoices that Bill enters needs to be approved by a manager who pays the bills. So we might want to uncheck the option for Bill to pay bills. And of course, under pay bills, there's all these other options as well, and assign that function to a separate accounts payable clerk or manager. Therefore, the invoices can be approved before they're paid. And so as you can see in Denali, you can set the user rights to be as specific or as general as you want to give each user. But the security features in Denali is all about what rights you give and what rights you don't give to each user. Only give them the rights to what they will be needing access to do their jobs and to do their work in Denali. Okay, and we switch to General Ledger. We'll switch back over here to our presentation if I can get it here. There it is. Okay, so the next thing we want to double check on is make sure that our cash accounts are imbalanced and reconciled. Now, of course, we all reconcile with the bank to make sure that what's at the bank shows what we have on record with our system. But Denali has an extra feature that allows you to reconcile with your general ledger, your balance sheet reports as well, to show what cash that's being recorded on the bank rec module matches what's on the income statement and on the balance sheets. And it's real simple to do. It's so simple that this is something you could do on a daily basis. You just open up your bank account in the bank account module, the bank reconciliation module, using the working with accounts. You can also open it up here under account maintenance, and it's just these two numbers right here. Your current bank account balance is reconciled with the bank, and your current general ledger balance for your cash account. This is what shows up on the balance sheet, which offsets your revenue in the income statement. So just a real quick glance to make sure these two numbers match is going to help keep your cash in line for your organization. And this works great with both the for-profit and the non-profit sectors, but it's very important, especially for nonprofits, that they keep track of their cash as it's coming and going in and out of their organization. The nonprofits may split the general ledger cash balance across several funds. That's okay. In Denali Bank Reconciliation, it combines all funds to give you the one bank account balance on the balance sheet to make sure that it matches the bank account balance as showing on the bank statement. And these two numbers should be the same numbers, and you can check those out every day. It's real simple. We just go into Bank Rec, click on Working with Accounts, open up your bank account, and there it is. There's our two numbers. We click Edit, it shows it a little darker here. So, all right. Now the next thing we want to double check on is to make sure that all of our expenses are going to the right place as well. So in Denali, we've got several options in accounts payable to help us with that. We'll go ahead and switch over to accounts payable. And of course, your first option is if your vendors are sending monthly statements, if you have like regular activity with your vendor and they send out monthly statements, then you can run your vendor aging report. And this report is a very nice report that shows a list of all the balances that you owe all vendors at the time you run the report. And what's great about this report is this is all the open items that are still unpaid as they've been entered into Denali. Now you can compare this with the vendor statement that they send you. So here we have our vendor 940 tax deposit. Here's each invoice listed that we owe that vendor, and we compare that with our vendor statement to give us a total amount due to that vendor. Now the reason why this is important for preventing fraud or detecting fraud is because if anyone is using your vendor account and not tracking that through Denali as it should be, and remember only the accounts payable clerk has access to enter invoices. So if somebody else is charging stuff on your account at your vendors, on your vendor accounts that doesn't belong, you'll see that on the vendor statement. If it doesn't match your aging report here, then we know we got a problem. We've got to track it down and figure out what's going on there. All right, and the next thing we want to double check is when we're looking at our income statement in Denali, the income statement, of course, will show us a list of all of our income and all of our expenses. So if we run the income statement here, I'm going to run it for the whole year just so I can get some activity on it here. We'll run the profit and loss statement. Now, most organizations and even nonprofit organizations, the director or the president or the one in charge of the organization is definitely going to be periodically reviewing this statement. The board of directors like to see this statement to see what revenues we receive and what expenses are going out. But what if we have an expense that jumps out at us here that seems a little odd, seems a little high, more than it should be for that period that we run the report for? Now, of course, our profit and loss will also show us a percentage of that expense based on total overall expenses for the organization. So that helps us to identify some of those that jump out. Here's one that's pretty high. Of course, that's our payroll expense, so that's probably normal. But if we grab one of these expenses here and we say, wait a minute, that seems a little high for that period, then we can switch back to our accounts payable module and we can run another report called our General Ledger Expense Distribution Report. And what's nice about this report is when we grab our expense item here that we saw on the profit and loss statement here, add it to the report, we can run it for as many income or expense accounts that we'd like to here. But I just want to see it for this one account because it looked a little odd. Then we go ahead and we run this report. What we see here is we see a list of all transactions posted to this expense account in General Ledger, but it lists those transactions by vendor and even by invoice number and the description and what that transaction was. And so we have another invoice number here. We have two invoices, two expenses to that account basically, that posted from accounts payable to our 6190 account, legal and accounting expense. Here's our vendor, Jan Moore. She's our attorney, so that makes sense. And we have 6 months of services, then we have miscellaneous charges here. So maybe that is normal. When we run this report, we see, okay, that might look normal. But if there's anything that's not normal, that's jumping out at us on the income statement, then this report will give us a breakdown of what makes up those numbers on the income statement so we can see exactly what we're looking for. Okay, so that is our expense distribution report here, and there's our income statement. All right, the next thing that's nice about Denali is if you have the purchase order module, you can also run another report called the Vendor Performance Report. And what's nice about this report is this is your supplier vendors that you can run this report for, and it will show you if the vendor is price gouging you, which is another form of fraud against your organization. So I got to add the vendor to the list here. Let's remove 940. I just want to show the one vendor here. So basically what happens is when you place an order using purchase order, you have the price that you expect that item to be at. But when the item comes in and the invoice is entered for that item, it was actually at a little bit higher cost than what we expected. So we see the difference here. And this is an indication that our vendor is price gouging us. Now this example isn't too good because of course it's only 55 cents different. That might be okay. But if this price received cost was like $60 or $70 when it should have been $46, we would see that on this report. Here's some other examples. Same vendor, but we just ordered different items. The received cost, so our price difference is $12.12 in this case. But these are higher priced items, so maybe we're okay with that. At the bottom, we see the total variance for that purchase order. So this is another way that you can use some of the reporting features in Denali to help protect you against any fraudulent activity that might be occurring in your organization. Okay, and of course the one thing that we always want to make sure we check on a periodic basis, especially if we're looking for something specific, is in the General Ledger module, we have the Denali Audit Trail. Now if you have set your integration options to General Ledger to detail on all of your other modules, make sure your integration is always integrated to detail in General Ledger, then every debit and every credit will post to the Denali Audit Trail. And we can run this audit trail for just a single account or a range of accounts, or we can run it for the entire General Ledger if we want. We can run it for specific periods or a range of periods, or we can run this by date. So if we're looking at our cash account in General Ledger, we bring up our audit trail. I'm going to run it for the entire year because in our demo company we don't have a lot of activities, so this should be okay. And this will show us every debit and every credit that posted to our cash account. And it also totals for each period, or each month in this case. What's nice about this is you have the date of the transaction reference number, the description, and what module the transaction was posted from. Then you have the amount of the transaction, whether it was a debit or a credit. This is our next transaction that posted to this account. So in this example, we have a transaction on January 31st. This is the reference number from the module. This is the description for that transaction. And this is the module it posted from. So this was a customer payment by check that we deposited into our cash account, because this is the account we're looking at, cash in bank, posted from the accounts receivable module, and it's a debit, which is an increase to the account balance. So that means that that was a payment from our customer. But one thing to keep in mind about the audit trail is it will sort the transactions by date. However, if one of your users in Denali is trying to hide something, they may predate it. They may enter a transaction and put a date on it that's a month out or a month behind. So the reference number is sorted by when the transaction was entered. So the reference number is going to be your sequential number that you can see coming from these modules. And if that reference number doesn't match your dates, that could be a sign that something doesn't belong, that something was entered in that shouldn't be there. Now that doesn't always mean that that's what it is, but it could be what it is. And that's why we have our description. And we also have the detail description too, for the transaction detail of what it was. Now in this case, since a payment is just a simple transaction, our detail description equals the main account description as well. But the one thing to keep an eye on is if you see something out of place, you can see who it was that entered that transaction, because it shows the user ID right here on the audit trail. And then if you need to investigate that, you can go to the person and ask them what that was for if you don't know what it is. And hopefully they'll have a good explanation for you. So the audit trail is also a very good report to use for security purposes if you see something out of place and you need to narrow down exactly what that is and find what it is that caused that item to be out of place. Okay, we're moving right along here today. Very good. And the one other thing we wanted to talk about, okay, that's the audit trail there, is in the payroll module. This is where your employees are, all the information for their paychecks is entered. And of course, most companies, hopefully not, but there are many that are susceptible to employee fraud, where that employee takes advantage of the time they worked, where they clock more time than they actually worked, and so forth. Now, Denali keeps track of all of your time through a system where you enter the payroll information when you run payroll. However, with the new features we have in our Denali Payroll module here, we have options here to include daily units that are imported from automated time tracking systems. And what's nice about that is if you're using the automated time tracking systems, then those systems have keys those systems have functions in there that will help you prevent employees from taking advantage by clocking in when they're not really working. We have one of our third-party time tracking systems is called T-Sheets that directly integrates to Denali. We also have options that if you're using other systems, you can convert the exported data from those systems into the Denali format and import those directly into payroll. And by doing that, it will help you avoid those employees from just writing down their time on a sheet or tracking it by some other method without some kind of a specialized time tracking system that can directly integrate to Denali. Now when you do this, when you enter the information into Denali, if you're including daily units, not only is that a more secure method, but it also prevents you from having to manually enter their hours every time you run payroll. And this was discussed in previous webinars when we talked about the Denali payroll functions. So not only are we helping to prevent fraud, but we're minimizing the workload in processing our payroll transactions. Because see, our hours are already included now for these employees. All right. Finishing up here. So those are some of the few features in Denali that you can use to help prevent fraud or minimize any kind of risky activity in your organization. One other thing I wanted to show you real quick today is in the controller module, we have a nice, neat little menu here under the reports called our red flag reports. These are some other reports you can run on a regular basis, such as the missing check report in Bankrec, reprint posting report from General Ledger, inventory movement report to help minimize the loss of inventory. Certain reports that we can look at here to help minimize the risk of certain activities that shouldn't be going on in your business. Sales price variance report is another one. That basically shows you the difference in the actual selling price of your items and the price they should have sold for, the list price that you have set those items for. So there's a lot of different reports here that you can run to also help you minimize risky activity in your business. And this is all in the controller module in one nice, neat place under the reports menu called the red flag reports. All right, so with that, be sure to contact your Cougar Mountain sales representative if you want to get information on additional features that can be added to your Cougar Mountain software, or if you are interested in looking into solutions that Cougar Mountain can do for you here. So while we're waiting to get the information populated here, just wanted to remind you that if you want to see additional webinars that we have upcoming, be sure to check out the Denali webinar series website here. It's cougarmountain.com/monthly webinar series. Going to this website, and let's just bring it up here real quick, you'll see a list of all upcoming webinars that we have, and you can also access the previous webinars that we've already aired at this website as well. All right, close that here. So here's a list of our webinars in chronological order, or we can click this link here to show a list of webinars by series, because we've got the different series. Here's our regular monthly webinars. Be sure to come back on June 3rd to find the out of balance in your balance sheet. But we have one before that under this Value of Reports webinar, Benefits of Financial Reporting. So we're going to be doing that webinar next week, same time, right here at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, 11 o'clock Pacific Time on Wednesday, May 27th. And these are the different webinar categories that we've got coming up. So be sure to check that out. All right, so if there's no other questions, I want to thank you all for coming today. It's been a pleasure doing the webinar for you. Be sure to check back if you have any questions or comments. Be sure to give us a call, 1-800-388-3038. Also, make sure that you go to the website that I was just showing you for follow-up communications and access to this recorded presentation. And with that, I want to thank you all again. It's been a great pleasure, and hopefully we'll see you back next week. Be sure to tell all your friends to log in to the webinar for next week. We'd love to have you. All right, have a great day, everybody. Talk to you later.